The question is that the motion be agreed to. I call the member for Lalor.
Deputy Speaker, I rise today to speak on the motion moved by the member for Cowan. A little aghast, Deputy Speaker, because as most people here will know, I came from school education before becoming a member of this place. And Deputy Speaker, I would raise the point that we had a federal review of education to see what it would take to improve the educational outcomes of students across this country under the previous Labor government, and that review found that equity in funding was the critical issue that needed to be addressed in education. So I find myself here in this place discussing something that I think was realistically an issue in schools a decade ago, Deputy Speaker, a decade ago. Initial concerns around weight of bags were addressed in schools in a variety of ways. In the school where I was working, it was addressed by a timetable change, not driven by the weight of bags, but driven by students' ability to concentrate and driven by trying to build resilience of study in our students. So in the school that I was working in, we did some time to study this and determined that we would move from 50-minute sessions to 100-minute sessions in a high school to ensure that students had time to connect with what they were learning, time to build in collaborative approaches, as well as time to build in individual concentration and focus writing practice in most cases for 20-minute periods in that 100 minutes. One of the side effects of this, of course, was that students only did 3 subjects across a given day and not 6, which of course reduced the load in their school bags by 50% if the timetable was done productively. One of the other ways, another one that became, that had an influence on the weight of school bags, of course, was students not bringing a change of clothes for sport, but wearing their sport uniform on the day that they were to do physical education or sport, which of course also reduced the weight they were carrying in the bags. But of course the most important thing that happened, and I'm sure people in this place remember, was the Building the Education revolution, which of course caused a digital disruption in our schools across this country with the introduction of personalised computers for students. Now, we've heard a lot of talk in the chamber this morning about laptops. People may not realise that most schools introduced netbooks and iPads, which of course weigh a lot less than a laptop. And of course that Building the Education revolution not only put more desktop computers into schools, but it also broke a pattern, if you like, between textbooks and digital technologies. And that has now been going on for some time. So I'm surprised, very surprised, that this is still an issue in schools across this country. I would have thought that most had moved. I would have thought that most school communities had addressed this issue some time ago, because of course it's 15 years since most textbooks had CDs delivered with them and the capacity for students to put the CD in their bag and take it to school. But I would raise this, and of course it's at least 7 years that publishers have provided interactive online content, Deputy Speaker. It's not looking out to 2030. Online textbooks and the ability to use the interactive websites that go with them have been available to schools for at least 7 years, Deputy Speaker, and most schools are using those resources very wisely. Of course, there are an enormous number of schools across the country, and perhaps some in remote and regional areas aren't getting to this place as quickly as others, Deputy Speaker, but I'm still surprised that this has not moved much further than it has. Of course, we all remember, I remember carrying the Web of Life and the heavy maths textbook in my school bag on my back. It's a long time since I did Year 12. Backpacks weren't the de rigueur of the day. We carried bags like this that we slung over one shoulder off one strap, and backpacks were introduced to stop that practice and ensure that both straps were going over children's backs. I don't think this is something the federal government can actually enforce. I hear a lot about a nanny state and then find myself here talking about things that could well and truly in the purview of parents and in the purview of schools. And I'm surprised, Deputy Speaker, because what is in the purview of the people opposite today is to improve the educational outcomes of students across this country, and I call on them to pay attention to that, Deputy Speaker.
Time has expired. The time